Yasu, I'm here with Alexandros Kastrinakis in Athens. We are near one of the busy streets of Athens here. Thanks for this interview. So, you're an historian.
Yes, I am a researcher.
Researcher in history. And we just had dinner and a very good discussion about the situation in Greece. We have a common friend, Sylvain Durin, which we say hi to.
Yes.
And look, Greece is today, we are in April 2015. Greece is in the news every day for the last almost 10 years about the debt, economic crisis, politics, etc., etc. What is the long-term context of the Greek crisis in your opinion?
The long-term context, actually, Greece is part of the European crisis. This is nothing more than that. Of course, Greece has its own faults and its own characteristica, which divert and give it a more perplexed, let's say, unique crisis situation. The point is that by showing Greece so much, we are trying to disrupt the European public from its real points and its real problems. To my point of view, the let's say, abuse of Greece in the media is part of a scheme in order to avoid talking about serious matters in Europe. Questions like banks, like debt, European debt, there are many indebted countries. Questions like social issues, social changes, like unemployment, etc. So big and central European question. So by dealing with a small, let's say, not that much famous, important country, not part of the central committee or the central part of Europe, we're trying to avoid dealing with major questions.
Now, the Greek debt, what was the cause? What is the cause of that?
There are many issues, many reasons for the Greek debt. The point is how to make it clear to you and easy to you to understand. Debt is part of a war game. In order to have to control a country, you either do it through debt or through war. This is a classic history. This is a classic way of dealing in international politics. So Greece is part of, it's, let's say, an unofficial Western colony. So in order to avoid having troops and war games all around this country, due to its geopolitical position, through Greece, you can control the Middle East, you can control Egypt, and of course the path to India and to China with the Suez Canal. You can control the Black Sea. You are the gate for the Balkans, and of course you are the gate for Italy, for Western Europe. So Greece is a very important country. So in order to do that, to have a control over the country, you use debt. This has been the cause of the debt cause for the country for the last almost 200 years, since the first, let's say, Greek independent war came in the 1820s. Yet there are many issues particular to Greece, but I'd rather prefer for you to focus on this one, the geopolitical position, which will give you a better understanding. In order to understand that, you can compare, for example, with the presence of the British in Asia, in Eastern Asia, or the French in Indochine, if you would like. If you make some comparisons, you can understand. It's a question of control and, of course, of exploitation of resources.
Now, one of the critiques that we in, let's say, Western Europe read a lot about Greece is that Greek government, of course, and even more so since being part of the Eurozone, has a very big difficulty, if not impossibility, to have a budget that is profitable, so that you always have to spend more money than you make. And of course, this critique comes with the assumption that there is a lot of corruption, which I think we all know, and we don't need to spend too much time, that we know that corruption is very big in the traditional political system in Greece. But the point you were saying before was that this is encouraged, and in fact the Goldman Sachs scandal was only the tip of the iceberg to show that having a government that is point one, corrupt, and point two, unable to actually make a budget, is in fact what the financial system wants. Debt is slavery. So how do you revert this process? How do you change that process? You just had the elections a few weeks ago, a few months ago, with, let's say, a left party, Syriza, in power, with a very charismatic, at least for finance minister, Varoufakis. Is it changing something? Is the political game too complicated? How can we see the reality beyond the media?
Well, sure. The system is very complicated, and there are lots of issues and problems in Greece involving the crisis and this actual new government. How, in order to revert what you're doing, you have to be very clear. You have, for example, one issue would be to have a new constitution, a constitution which does not allow to politicians to be over the law. So you need to control them. This is a major issue in Greece. For example, Greece does not have a higher court, constitutional court, which allowed, first of all, our, let's say, créanciers, our
creditors.
Our creditors and our political system to collaborate and to organize this great crisis scheme in the last 5 years. So you need to have a division and a clearance among politicians and among, of course, control and power, legislative power, effective power, and of course juridical power. Secondly, what this government is trying to do is this government is dealing with a very, I repeat, delicate situation. But I think the government is trying to use to its means, as a positive mean, the actual international condition. Okay, 5 years ago we had a different conditioning in the international sphere from today. This is what they're doing. This is how they have to proceed. There is not much they can do. Europe needs to change. We have these extreme neoliberal, if we can mention them so, politics, which actually are similar, if not identical, in every European country. This needs to be changed. So you as people, as Europeans, need to focus more on your own politics, on your countries, on the problems you are dealing with, if you don't want to finish up like Greece. So, okay, this is what you have to do. You have to understand that politicians have to be controlled in one way or another by you.
In one way or another. And I think emphasis is on another, because I don't know for Greece, but I think a lot of people in Europe are realizing they're not in a democracy at all. Now, if you mention what European people can do, what do you think Greek people can do to also move the situation to maybe not something that is going to be fantastically better immediately, but for the long term, to get back some freedom, to get back some sovereignty, autonomy? What can Greek people do today?
Well, first of all, they have to focus on themselves. Unfortunately, the country has a very special characteristic. This is not a Central European country, which it doesn't border Austria or Switzerland, so it needs to focus on its own economy. You need to have a certain control of your economy, which means that the financial issues are very important on that. Whether we leave the euro and we go back to a national, let's say to the drachma, to a national currency or not, is the issue of great discussions. But this is one of the solutions, and unfortunately, whether we like it or not, one of the best. So you need to have a certain degree of financial control. This doesn't apply just in Greece. This applies in every European country. In order to have economy is combined to democracy. If you want to have a certain control, a certain amount, if we can say so, of democracy, you need to have a certain control over your country's finances. Okay, which doesn't mean that you need extreme cases. That doesn't mean that you need authoritarian politics in one way or another. But it means that you, as democratic people, need to know what is happening with the serious issues, financial issues of your country. So this is what the Greeks have to do first. Secondly, Greece has lots of possibilities. This is a very rich country. The problem is not the richness and the financial problems of the country. The problem here is who controls, cui bono, so for whom the means are controlled. We, in reality, never controlled our own economy or never benefited from our resources, which are great. Although in Europe we always think of Greece like a poor, almost underdeveloped country, quite on the contrary, the country booms actually of resources and options and opportunities. The problem is that the country is not free to choose among different issues and financial questions. So the same, to a certain degree, operates and goes for every European country. It needs to focus too. Apart from the collaboration with other countries and other people, it needs to focus on its own means, on its own possibilities, and on the bettering of the life of the people of the country, of the citizens of the country.
One of the things you mentioned about being a rich country, and I think it's not surprising that rich countries today are the ones that are the most in debt. One of the problems when you have debt is that the system that you owe money to basically forces you to sell your assets, whether you're a company or a country, to sell your assets to generate cash to pay interest of the debt, if not part of the debt. But those assets are usually much more valuable than the price they are sold to, and even if one excludes the corruption into the selling process of assets. Assets that have been sold in Greece are harbors, airports, mountains, islands, motorways, all of the things you have indebted yourself to build or to modernize.
Yes.
Now, we mentioned Germany access now to the Mediterranean seas, and you mentioned geopolitics. You mentioned China having some interest now in this part of the Mediterranean, and therefore the Balkans and Eastern Mediterranean. Isn't it that geopolitics is played by these big companies instead of countries, and it's not really Germany who has this not Drang nach Osten but Drang nach Süd policy, but it's German companies or American companies or Chinese companies who are playing in this grand strategy game to get influence, to get slaves, to get assets on the cheap, and to make great profit on your back, on the Greek back.
Definitely, this is a long geopolitical and historical questions. We can talk about these questions already from the time of the British and Dutch expansion into the Indies. Okay, how very often the private companies oblige the countries to follow them on their issues, or how they preceded the politics of the countries. So, of course, to a certain degree, to a great degree, we can unite this history. That's why history is very important. This is not just about dates and soldiers' deaths, etc. This is about your life. History is about mentioning and about talking and explaining previous lives in order for you to ameliorate your own life, in order for you to understand the ways and means to have a decent living and understanding of life. And then, of course, it is true, in Greece those assets are sold in a certain way, but today There are two ways of doing that. One is through wars, or let's say extreme violence. So you either need to kill some people, like Allende, okay, in Chile in 1973, or you need some kind of wars, civil wars, etc. Or you need to have already installed corrupt politicians. When you have already installed corrupt politicians, and when you have already made some deals with them, as it is the case not only in Greece but in most, for example, of Latin American countries in the past, or today in many African countries, then it is easier for you to get the assets for nothing, because those politicians are easily corruptible. They have already taken money from you or assets, and they know that you can control them. You have papers, and you can show to the world, and you have ways to oppress them. So they're very malleable to your needs. Okay. So
sometimes politicians can be former or future employees of the private companies who will buy these assets.
In fact, to that issue, I would recall the attention of European citizens and people, because we see that more and more often in Europe happening, which is very dangerous, and it shows a path. So for you have to focus why your politicians more and more get more and more involved in private companies, especially, for example, with those crises and problems in France during the privatization of waters and water commodities.
Yeah, that was a big scandal.
Yes.
And it's just the beginning. Now, as people, if I understand what you say, we should act. Now, on one side, a lot of us are consumers. We are too busy spending the money we make, and we're too busy working hard to make this money so that we can spend on the new TV, new car, new home, whatever. On the other hand, some of us are too poor. We're already crushed by the economic collapse and crisis, and we have no more energy or no more resources, or we are so depressed that we have no more time for political action or other actions, as you said before. How can we all, from those who are still winning in the system and those who have already lost from the system, how can we get back into a different game, which is to get back our power?
Well, first of all, information. Information is everything. You need to be informed. You need to find alternative ways of information. Secondly, you have to see the resources in your country, in your village, in your community. You have to, whatever you want to change has to be changed first in a small and let's say a small environment. Okay, before going to deep, great changes, you have to do this path. You cannot achieve big if you don't start small. You need first to understand your community, to see what problems are there, how to work and collaborate with people in your city, in your environment, in your small country. It depends how small or big a country is, of course, but it's in most European countries, which are quite relatively large, let's say, you have to start from your city, from those problems. And of course, you need control of your productions. In order to change anything in your system, you need food. You need to know, you need to have the possibility to have your own food to some extent. Whether these are going to be apples, grain, whatever,
Saganaki.
potatoes or saganaki. You have, first of all, so in order, you need to be prepared. Like for everything in life, when you have to do something, you need to be prepared. So if you want to have a certain degree of control, you need first to be informed, and then you need food. So you have to be more or less austere or free to a certain degree from what the system gives you. Because if you cannot control any of these, the system can very easily derange your forces and actually make you lose energy on nothing. So energy, your beauty, your love for life, for people, for your children, for the previous generations, and for your culture has to start first from evaluating your forces. you shouldn't lose forces on doing things which are too big. You start small and you grow. This is the way to do it, I believe. So you have to be informed. You start small and you control food, and then you will achieve more.
So let's be clear. You have not read my books yet.
No.
Because this is exactly what I say to people that read my book to do. This is exactly the step to gain sustainability, to get autonomous. The more autonomous you are, the more free you are, and therefore the more you can act. And of course, you have to start small. So I will send you a copy of my book to your whatever address you want soon. Anyway, I want to thank you very much for your time, and I hope to see you as I come often in Greece. I encourage people to come to Greece to not just to spend money, but also to rediscover one of the fundamental roots and origins of the real Western civilization, the real source of not only democracy, but also philosophy and some of our cultures and some of the art and some of the way of living that is fundamental to the real Western world, not the Western world that we see today, but what Western world was and should be. Anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you, it's my pleasure.
And ευχαριστώ.
Ευχαριστώ, me too.